We are going to start taking this procession as it begins, leaving Maple Grove High School. And so we're just going to let you watch this for a while. We may dip into a little bit of the coverage, but it will be going from Maple Grove down 494 to 62 and then off to the airport. And we're going to carry it in near entirety up to the point of about Highway 62.
Yeah, so we'll allow you to watch this as we are, as the folks there are, in its entirety, as if you were there. I know many of you want to be there and we're not unable to be there today. So let's let this play out, and as we feel it's appropriate, we'll come back in and talk through some of this. So we'll let this go just now.
All right, you're watching the procession of a fallen officer, Minneapolis police officer Jamal Mitchell, as it passes through Maple Grove, and this procession will head down 94 to 494 and then toward the airport. And
our Karen Scullin is along I-94. We're going to check in with her in just a minute along 93rd Avenue, where you can see there are folks, again, this is in Maple Grove, lined up along the city streets there, paying their respects and honoring Officer Jamal Mitchell and law enforcement as well as his family.
And this will be one of the few really neighborhood type of streets where people can line up on the route. In other spots, because it's mostly a highway route, you'll have people on overpasses, but I think there will be a lot of people here because of the availability of sidewalks and that sort of thing. But the thin blue line flags, the American flags, people just standing just so that the officers see their faces as they make their way through this procession today.
And it is moving pretty quickly, buses carrying family, of course, and other dignitaries, and it will head down from 94 down 494 from Maple Grove down to Highway 62, and that southbound lane will be closed. So while they are moving pretty quickly, they will also move in a solemn manner as well once this procession gets underway onto 494. And our Karen Scullin is along the route. We checked in with her just a few minutes ago, and she was able to talk to some folks who have come from many different cities. She had spoken to somebody from Woodbury who'd come in. We know that law enforcement officers from all over the country are here, as often happens whenever we have a tragedy like this and we're honoring one of our fallen. And I'm sure that their presence is also appreciated. Jeff Beck, Captain Jeff Beck from Rogers Police is here with us as well. And if you wanted to sort of speak up here as well and talk to us about this procession as well, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, it's obviously going to take some time to get all the law enforcement vehicles out of the parking lot at the school. But you know, as officers see the people that we're seeing on TV just standing there, some of them literally stopping their cars and getting out and standing up. It's just such a great reminder to all of them as well, obviously honoring Officer Mitchell, but just let them know, hey, we're supporting you.
Yeah.
I was going to say his badge number again, 4819. You'll see that on the black memorial bands that are on the badges today. End of watch, we heard that call outside the high school, 5:30:24. And outside the high school today, just a little bit ago, we saw the honor guard, the flag being presented to the family. So many emotional moments, and there you see the hearse with Jamal Mitchell's body being taken down the highway. We have Karen Scullin ready to talk a little bit about what it's like on the procession route with so many strangers there, just to show that they support him and law enforcement. Karen?
Right, yes, the procession has come through here on 93rd Avenue for a few minutes now, led by the Minneapolis Police Department, of course, family ahead of that, a person ahead of that. But MPD is now going past the airport for some time, various law enforcement personnel. And then there's also been several buses, big buses that all marked Minneapolis, bus 1, 2, 3, 4, Minneapolis 6. And you can see obviously lights flashing, and a lot of people.
All right, sorry, Karen, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. We'll try to get your audio fixed there so we can come back to you. But you can see all of these Minneapolis police officers who are now part of this procession. And we want to reiterate, so many law enforcement officers in the community are covering shifts for Minneapolis Police today. It's a huge department, and so that is a huge task. And I know Captain Beck, who's with us here today from Rogers PD, you worked an overnight shift before coming here. So tell us again just the undertaking for Minneapolis Police so that they are supported during this process.
Yeah, absolutely. The Hennepin Chiefs has an association, and of course reached out to Chief O'Hara, and you know they chatted about what this would look like, and asking for the coverage for 24 hours was a very small thing that the rest of us could do, but also a big undertaking. Right? There's a lot of precincts, and last night, I know just in the first precinct where we started at 8:30, we had 22 officers from Plymouth, from airport, from transit, St. Anthony. And so it was just a huge effort on everybody's part. But again, the least thing we can do, where the Minneapolis officers need to be is where you see on TV right now, is in the procession, rested from last night, not having to work that night shift, or most of them not having to work that night shift, and being there for Officer Mitchell and being there for each other.
Yeah, we continue to watch this live feed here, different shots of the procession moving from 94 onto 494 South, headed toward Highway 62 in Eden Prairie, where the procession will then break off and head east. Tell us about last night. How was it for you being in Minneapolis? What was the reaction from folks there? What was the experience like?
It was a lot of positives. Right from the moment we got there, I think you guys interviewed Chief Wills from Rogers, and just people walking up saying, "Hey, thanks for being here," not even really asking why all these other cities are there. They knew that this was coming today, and they knew that today would be the day that they're going to pay respects to Officer Mitchell, and so they were just appreciative. I mean, I remember a few times sitting at a stoplight and people roll down their windows and you're wondering what they're going to say to you, and jokingly they'll ask, if we were lost, but we were there to support Minneapolis Police Department, and there was a lot of agencies from Hennepin County, Ramsey County, St. Paul I know was there as well, just to support overnight, and again today, right now, and some of it into this evening, so these officers can take that breather and just have that moment before they have to go back to work.
Because the calls do not stop.
Right.
We have Karen Scullin back again, and she's on 93rd Avenue in Maple Grove near the beginning of that procession. So just Karen, tell us what you're seeing.
Yes, we are out here on 93rd Avenue, and what I'm seeing is really just an unremarkable show of support by the Minneapolis Police Department. This procession has been going on for several minutes now, and the MPD cars are still going by, not another police department as of yet. Now, of course, we did have the family ahead of them, and some buses were also mixed in, but MPD, these cars are still going by, and as we know, other departments are covering Minneapolis while they are able to pay their respects. We have airport police now coming through as well, and if we can pan over here, this is 93rd that Melissa is showing you right now, but you can pan over and you see they kind of go around the horn, and then they are now getting on to I-94 South. One after another, and there you see it, the MPD cars one after another, and a lot of folks out here, of course, waving their flags, American flags, blue line flags, a lot of people with their hands over their hearts. It's very quiet out here, very somber. I think a lot of people feeling very emotional watching the show of support, and of course they are all out here for Officer Mitchell, but the folks here on the bridge say they're out here for Officer Mitchell, but also all members of law enforcement who really need our support right now. And they did want to show their support, not only to the family, not only to Officer Mitchell, but to all of law enforcement here. And that is why they say they are out here. Some come from military families, fire department families. Some aren't connected at all except to the community. A real sense of community now. Wright County Sheriff going by as well. Maple Grove, of course, where we are right now. Maple Grove Police showing their support. Just a very long procession driving past us at this point, in between these people here paying their respects to the police officers, to law enforcement, to all of law enforcement on the 93rd Avenue Bridge that is over 94. And she's showing you again the folks, the police departments, police cars getting onto I-94 South to head towards the airport right now.
Hey Karen, this is Amy. If I could ask you a quick question. We heard from Chief Brian O'Hara during the service, and I know you've had a chance to interview him over the years since he started, and he came at a really difficult time after the murder of George Floyd. Can you just give us some insight into kind of how you feel like he's doing, if you've had a chance to ask him how he is handling this sort of this time right now? We've heard him talk a lot about the increased attacks on law enforcement, and he brought some of that up during his message as well.
I think the chief is really struggling with this. I do know he was out of town at a chief's conference. I believe it was in New Orleans when he got the call or got the text as to what had happened here in Minneapolis. And some folks that were at that meeting, they all sort of got the page at once or the text at one time. They said he couldn't have flown out of his chair faster. He was like in a track meet. He flew out that door, ran to the airport as fast as he could. And as we know, later that night, while the city, the mayor, and others had already given their press conference earlier in the day about what had happened to Officer Mitchell and some of the other victims there on Blaisdell Avenue, the police chief still felt it was important to get in front of the cameras and get in front of the media so he could say something as well. And he did that about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning after he got off that flight from New Orleans. So I do know that this has hit him deeply hard. I think he's grown to love this department, even though he hasn't been here all that long. But he does feel a part of this city, does definitely feel like the leader of this department. He is the leader, of course, of the department. So he's struggling emotionally as well. But what I've heard is that he's really trying to support the family and support the officers within the department as well.
And Karen, this is Kelsey. You've been covering this from the very beginning, from the time that call at 5:30 p.m. on May the 30th came out that an officer was down. And I know I was with you in the newsroom when you said, I talked to this officer, I know who this officer is, and you have a lot of police contacts. Can you just tell me how officers in general are doing as you've covered this story over the last couple of weeks?
I think they're all struggling. They're struggling a lot because, I think on days like today, of course, they feel supported. Everybody's out here supporting them and waving their flags, and it's a hard day, but they do feel supported on days like this. Other days, though, they're concerned. I mean, at times it's a little scary. Because they don't know how they're going to be received when they're actually just there to help. I remember one of my colleagues did an interview with a St. Paul police officer who did not know Officer Mitchell, but he was at a fundraiser for the family. And he remarked that a lot of the officers are in roll call are just nervous, a little jumpy as they're heading out the door. And it seems to be getting more and more that way, even since the 3 first responders were killed in Burnsville. And now we have this one. It's just become a very unsteady, sort of a violent feel out there for officers. But at the same time, I think they do feel, and I feel like I have seen a growing amount of support for law enforcement as well. So while it's still a bit unstable, in some situations, I think overall the support for law enforcement is in fact growing. And Minneapolis police are no exception. I think the support for them is growing, although they are still struggling as staffing, as we know, is just so far down. Having some officers, ride alone in cars, as Officer Mitchell did that night. But they're holding it together. They keep going out there and doing their job despite maybe having these feelings. They're obviously well trained and they know they have the job to do and they want to keep everybody safe. I think everybody, in MPD has the same goal, and that's to keep the community safe.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I wanted to ask our guest here, Captain Jeff Beck from Rogers PD, to weigh in on that as well, as we see the show of support. And unfortunately, we've been here before, just a few months ago. Remember driving and seeing the procession, and your gut you just have this sinking, awful feeling when you see something like this. But then we all get to go on with our lives, and the next day comes, and the next day comes, and that in your gut just gets a little bit better, and you start to forget. How can we, as a community, continue to support law enforcement day to day beyond just days like this when things are really, really hard, as Karen was alluding to?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, we have to continue to try to come together as communities and build that trust and understanding back with law enforcement, and engage, like we talked about at the funeral. Get out and talk to somebody, communicate with your local law enforcement agencies, or if you see one getting gas or at a store or having a restaurant, just have that conversation. It is so nice just to, hey, just checking in on you, how you doing? How nice that kind of changes your thinking process, and seeing, the people standing out here today with the flags and the show of support, and
And you were saying earlier, even if the conversation isn't a fun one, even if it's something
Right.
you have a concern about, just start that engagement.
Absolutely. I just think we need to get back to that one-on-one conversation and having those good talks and bad talks of what's going on in our communities, and just being able to have that dialogue with each other and supporting each other and figuring it out. Like Officer Mitchell, there's so many stories today. They shared about just him doing different things, changing a tire, or stopping back, or asking his partner that spoke about, hey, can you check on this house for me tonight? You know.
Yeah, that human connection too, and instead of being at odds with one another, finding ways to find common ground. You're looking at this procession as it makes its way through 494 and 55, and there's the hearse carrying Officer Mitchell's body. As it makes its way through Plymouth and then down to Eden Prairie and then ultimately to the airport, where his body will be flown home to Connecticut tomorrow. And at Bradley International, police officers will continue that escort to a funeral home. I also want to make note that there were some lighter moments in the service today that helped us to understand who Officer Mitchell was, and the pastor saying that his family, they all wore Nikes to the service today. And the pastor then pulled up his own foot and showed that he was wearing a pair of Nikes today because he loved his Nike tennis shoes. And his friend Luke mentioning that just the day before his death, he was at the pool with his kids and had on his favorite pair of Nikes, but there was a kid struggling in the water, and he jumped in with his shoes still on to make sure that this kid was okay. And that's just the kind of person that he was every single day of his life, was giving back to the community. Joined the police force after 2020, which, you know, some of his friends said, are you sure you want to do that? But he wanted to go where he felt he was needed. Law enforcement, a job that came later in life. And he was bigger than life, by all accounts, just bigger than life. Somebody who would drop everything if somebody was in distress. Officer Weatherspoon saying that today. He always had your back. And if he saw somebody in distress, everything else went out the window. And he was that, even in the last moments of his life. Captain Beck, you mentioned that as these squads are headed down the interstates here today, they see people on the overpasses. They saw so many people on 93rd Avenue in Maple Grove, that they're also talking to one another. And you've been in a lot of these processions. Tell me what the conversations are like between law enforcement officers right now.
Yeah, generally in these processions, you're going to see, you know, a couple officers in each patrol vehicle, and it's what I've seen and experienced is it's quiet. You're reflecting a little bit about the service, I'm sure. You're talking about, you know, what's going on with the people, and, you know, probably conversations about the support that they're showing everyone. And so I think it's a moment where you have to just stop and reflect, where you're kind of in a safe place in a squad car that you're used to being in, and now you're leaving an officer's funeral, and just taking a few moments to process that, and the appreciation that these officers feel for seeing these people stand on the side of the road, or just taking a moment out of their busy day, because they have places they need to get to, and they have kids they need to pick up, and just embracing that for just a couple minutes while and respecting the procession as it goes by.
I'm also struck by the sort of wide range of folks who are standing there, the children, especially the parents who decided that this was an important moment to bring their children to experience this, even though they may be too young to really understand what's going on. No doubt they will remember this, and it will form an impression. And I guess we can only hope that as they hear these stories about Officer Mitchell, that sticks with them as an example of the best of the police force. We heard almost to a person, every person mentioned that today, that he is the epitome. He exemplifies the best of our city, the best of our department. Mayor Jacob Fry said that he chose policing post-2020. Not only did he choose policing, he chose Minneapolis. Of all the cities, he chose Minneapolis. Of all the departments, MPD, he chose us. And that has to just I mean, it sends shivers down my spine, because I think, my goodness, from everything we have heard, who would want to go into a situation where there's a lot of work yet to be done? You know, we haven't seen the best of policing in that city. And again, there's a lot of work to be done, but for him to choose that and say, I want to make a difference, and see in a short amount of time the difference that he made is just remarkable.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's we're saying, you know, what the sad part about is the potential that he had, hearing all these stories of what was he going to be 10 years from now in that agency. You know, was he going to be a commander or a chief, or he just, in the short amount of time, like you said, the impact that he had is just amazing to hear. And I think through this entire service, just I feel like I know him personally now, though I didn't. But his story and how they reflected about this is what Minneapolis Police Department wanted for officer, and his legacy is going to build so many more things as it goes and remembers him.
And Chief O'Hara saying, you know, so often the Minneapolis Police Department is taking a careful look at itself after the murder of George Floyd and moving forward. And the impression has been that the community is really at odds, but he was saying today the community and police department are a lot closer than people would really believe or know, and he feels that every day. And he said he's witnessed that at the memorial site at the 5th Precinct with the squad car there and the memorial that they have for Officer Mitchell. So many people pouring in to leave flowers, praying in different languages. They're all coming together of different faiths, and he sees that as a real positive moment for people in the wake of tragedy, a positive moment for this city to be able to come together and build and evolve. 11 officers in our region have lost their lives in the line of duty in just over a year, and it's happening in the cities, but also in rural parts of western Wisconsin and rural Minnesota. And I can tell you, as I was saying earlier, I was in Chautauqua, Wisconsin just last weekend, where 2 officers were killed on a traffic stop about a year ago. The signs are still up with their pictures in town, and the original blue ribbons that were tied around a lot of the light poles and trees in people's yards, those have not been taken down. So it's a difficult time where you feel like the earth is kind of moving beneath your feet as we figure out post-2020 what is policing in our communities. How do we work together and move forward together? In this moment, though, there's so many people. It's so wonderful to see people coming together on the sides of streets, at the memorial site, to show their respect. And I know you've talked about this a lot today, just what you've witnessed filling in that overnight shift for MPD, and people waving to you, saying hello, saying thank you.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Chief O'Hara said it best, you know, that we're a lot closer than people think, and we're working hard. And I think that could be echoed across our state. All our agencies are, I know we are in Rogers, just really working hard to get to the next level where we can be the best we can be, right? And Officer Mitchell was one of those people. He was one of the go-tos at Minneapolis, talking about, you know, I remember being a sergeant, you know, those people are the people you want to call, because when you're in a pinch and you need somebody to fill a shift,
right,
that's who you call, you know.
Yeah.
And having all the dynamics of a busy household and young kids, and being able to drop that and go, and that calling is more than just a paycheck, and more than just lights and sirens and the uniform. It's the commitment to your community and knowing that you're going to make that difference.
And the commitment his entire family really had to make, with a fiance partner who had also has a demanding job in healthcare, and then also these young kids who still need help with homework at the end of the night, and still need need their parents there to talk to from time to time. So the fact that he could just balance all of this, and by all accounts from everybody we talked to, make it just look effortless with that bright, wide smile that he had all the time. The one neighbor who said, "You could offer me $1 million and there's not a bad word that I could say about Jamal Mitchell." I don't know that I know another human being that you could say that about. I mean, really just an incredible, incredible man.
Maybe we just watch the procession here for a few moments, and we'll dip back in and talk when we feel it's appropriate. watching live coverage of this procession of Officer Jamal Mitchell's body being taken from Maple Grove High School, where there was a memorial service today, out to the airport. And this is the turn on to 62 from 494, the Eden Prairie Minnetonka line.
And this is the portion of the procession that will break off and head toward the airport. We understand that Jamal Mitchell's body will arrive in Newport, Connecticut on Wednesday, and State Patrol, New Haven police officers will greet him there, along with a contingency from Minneapolis PD. Jamal Mitchell's from that area, New Haven, Connecticut, and that is also where he will be laid to rest. So we will continue to follow this here for a few more minutes and just let you experience this with some natural sound, and we'll be back with you here in a moment.
And this is, again, you're watching a live coverage of the procession as the body of Officer Jamal Mitchell is taken to the airport from Maple Grove today, where the memorial service happened. This is nearing the end of the procession now at 62 and Gleason in Edina, and a small group will break off to follow his body to the airport property. But we're nearing the end of where the large procession will branch off. and just hundreds of vehicles, Amy, out there today from so many different departments, officers who've come in from other parts of the country and other parts of the state.
And we heard our Karen Scullin talking earlier in the streets of Maple Grove prior to even entering onto 94. It was several minutes of just Minneapolis police squad cars. So obviously huge contingency there. We've seen squads from all over. We saw Fargo. And we know from our guest who's with us, Captain Jeff Beck from Rogers PD, that these officers really do come from all over and they want to be here. They need to be here.
Yeah, I got to assume that there's probably officers from New York City, from across North Dakota and South Dakota and Wisconsin. They make it a priority. And one thing that they do that is kind of neat, I think, at the service, those officers coming in will leave a patch, one of their department patches in a basket, and that eventually makes it to the family. So they have something to remember by and say, someday as they remember Officer Mitchell, go through that and say, here is all the people that came to pay respects.
You can see this is Highway 62, the crosstown, and this is a section of highway that was not shut down, but you can see the cars have pulled off to the side, and there are dozens of people on this particular overpass here, but each and every one of those overpasses, you can imagine, has folks who are up there paying their respects. We've seen young children, people of all ages coming out today from many different parts of Minnesota, who just felt like they needed to be here today to honor Officer Mitchell and his legacy that he leaves. And speaking of that legacy, I think as we sort of start to wrap up our coverage here of this procession, so important to talk about the what's next and the what we can learn from this and how we can use it moving forward in a way that would respect the legacy of Officer Mitchell. And I don't know if you have some thoughts on that as well, Captain.
Yeah, I think, again, his memorial service just showed how passionate he was and how caring he was. And I think his from his aunt to his partner to his chief to his mayor, the message is that law enforcement wants the best in our communities. Then law enforcement wants us to be out there and to protect and to serve. And they talked about what they meant on the side of the Minneapolis police car. And just to come together and support each other. And I think, Officer Mitchell, that's what he would want the message to be.
Captain Beck, thank you so much for everything that you've helped to provide during this coverage today. You've been with the Law Enforcement Memorial Association for a long time, planning these types of services. You've been in law enforcement a long time with the Rogers Police Department currently. We listened to Chief Brian O'Hara with the Minneapolis Police Department speak today at this memorial service, and just want to share a couple of things that he said as he was speaking. And he said Jamal was here to put our lives, he was here to put his life on the line on behalf of others. And he said, as people of faith, we know that Jamal was here with a purpose. People like Jamal agree to show up on behalf of others. He represents the vast majority of police officers in that way. Every time you answer a call, you step out of the car, you just never know. He says Jamal Mitchell rose to every challenge. He was a go-to guy. He was intentional about being a role model and heroic in the way that he lived his life, even when he wasn't wearing the uniform.
I also just want to mention, again, his family, Jamal Mitchell's family, his fiance, partner, Tori, 20-year-old Cohen, Jalen, who's 9, Caden, who's 7, and Mason, who's 4 years old. And this is the immediate family that he leaves behind. And we hope that today they heard and saw stories that will stay with them forever and make them realize just what an amazing father they had, a role model, and what an amazing officer he was. One of the things that was said is, he lived a hero, which we heard story after story. He died a hero, and he will be remembered as a hero as well.
His longtime partner, Tori, in the statement that she released last week, saying that she and Jamal created such a beautiful life in Minnesota, and he was deeply passionate about helping and serving the community. That was on full display today. And she did say on behalf of our family and from the bottom of her heart, she wanted to thank the friends, the neighbors, and loved ones and the entire community for all of the support. And in hearing from one of his neighbors at the service today, that was the last part of his tribute, was saying that they will never leave the side of this family, that they will wrap them up in support and be there for them in the very, very difficult days to come. Again, this is around 62 and Gleason, where the procession is now wrapping up. It started in Maple Grove, where the service was earlier today, starting around 11:30 this morning. And then a small procession will then continue on to the airport property, but most of it will end here at 62 in Gleason and Edina. And then the procession will continue again tomorrow after his body is flown to New Haven, Connecticut, where he is from.
And you can continue to watch a shot like this on Fox Local. Here on Fox 9, we'll be sending you back to programming. Last thing I just wanted to mention was what Officer Luke Witherspoon, a close friend, said about him. He's the hero that the city of Minneapolis needed. God needed a hero. He called on Mitch, and he answered the call. He rode the wings of an angel, greeted by family and friends. So rest in peace, Officer Jamal Mitchell, badge number 4819.